to make sure your ribbons are straight, your hair is combed right, and your legs are not ashy. And before you know it, you are living at her house. And every night, instead of your mother, your aunt is handing you dinner and telling you when it is time to go to bed, and pulling the blanket up over your shoulders and saying, "Good night, sunshine," and sometimes have a smile in her voice. That is what an aunt does.
For My People by Margaret Walker Alexander. For my people everywhere, singing their slave songs repeatedly, their dirges and their ditties and their blues and jubilees, praying their prayers nightly to an unknown God, and bending their knees humbly to an unseen power. For my people lending their strength to the years, to the now years, and the gone years, and the may-be years, washing, ironing, cooking, scrubbing, sewing, mending, hoeing, digging, planting, pruning, patching, dragging along. Never gaining, never knowing, never reaping, and never understanding. For my playmates in the clay and dust and sand of Alabama backyards, playing, preaching, and doctor and jail and soldier and school and mama and cooking and playhouse and concert and store and Miss Chumby and hair and company. For the cramped, bewildered years, we went to school to learn to know the reasons why and the answers to and the people who and the places where and the days when. In memory of the bitter hours when we discovered we were black and poor and small and different, and nobody cared and nobody understood. For the boys and girls who grew in spite of these things to be man and woman, to laugh and dance and sing and play and drink their wine and religion and success, to marry their playmates and bear children, and then die of consumption and anemia and lynching. For my people, thronging 47th Street in Chicago, or Lenox Avenue in New York, or Rampart Street in New Orleans, lost, disinherited, dispossessed, and happy people filling the cabarets and taverns and other people's pockets, needing bread and shoes and milk and land and money and something all our own. For my people walking blindly, spreading joy, losing time, being lazy, sleeping when hungry, and shouting when burdened, drinking when hopeless, tied, tangled and shackled among ourselves by the unseen creatures who tower over us omnisciently and laugh. For my people blundering and groping and floundering in the dark of churches and schools and clubs and societies, associations and councils and committees and conventions, distressed and disturbed and deceived and devoured by money-hungry, glory-craving leeches, preyed on by facile force of state and fad and novelty, by false prophet and holy believer. For my people standing, trying to fashion a better world from confusion, from hypocrisy and misunderstanding, trying to fashion a world that will hold all the people, all the faces, all the Adams and Eves and their countless generations. Let a new earth rise. Let another world be born. Let a bloody peace be written in the sky. Let a second generation full of courage issue forth. Let a people loving freedom come to growth. Let a beauty full of healing and strength of final cleansing be the pulsing in our spirits and our blood. Let the martial songs be written. Let the dirges disappear. Let a new race of men now rise and take control.
When You Have Forgotten Sunday, it's a love story that Gwendolyn Brooks wrote. And when you have forgotten the bright bedclothes on a Wednesday and a Saturday, and most especially when you have forgotten Sunday, when you have forgotten Sunday halves in bed, or me sitting on the front room radio in the limping afternoon, looking off down the long street to nowhere, hugged by my plain old wrapper of no expectation, and nothing have I to do, and I'm happy. Why? And the money never had to come. When you have forgotten that, I say. And how you swore if somebody beeped the bell, and how my heart played hopscotch if the telephone rang, and how we finally went into Sunday dinner. That is to say, went across the front room floor to the ink-spotted table in the southwest corner to Sunday dinner, which was always a chicken and noodles or chicken and rice, and salad and rye bread and tea and chocolate chip cookies. I say, when you have forgotten that, when you have forgotten my little presentiment that the war would be over before they got to you, and how we finally undressed and whipped out the light and flowed into bed and lay loose-limbed for a moment in the weekend bright bedclothes and gently folded into each other. When you have, I say, forgotten all that, then you may tell, then I may believe that you have forgotten me well. Gwendolyn.
We real cool, the pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool, we left school, we lurk late, we strike straight, we sing sin, we thin gin, we jazz June, we die soon.
We Were Cool by Gwendolyn Brooks.
We real cool, we left school, we lurk late, we strike straight, we Sing, sing, we, then gin we, jazz, June we. Die soon, die soon, die soon.
Old Lem by Sterling Brown. I talked to Old Lem, and Old Lem said, they weigh the cotton, they store the corn. We only good enough to work the rows. They run the commissary, they keep the books. We gotta be grateful for being cheated. Whippersnapper clerks call us out of our name. We gotta say mister to spendlin' boys. They make our figures turn somersets. We buck in the middle, say thank you, sir. They don't come by ones. They don't come by twos, but they come by tens. They got the judges. They got the lawyers. They got the jury rolls. They got the law. They don't come by ones. They got the sheriffs. They got the deputies. They don't come by twos. They got the shotguns. They got the rope. We get the justice in the end, and they come by tens. Their fists stay closed, their eyes look straight. Our hands stay open, our eyes must fall. They don't come by ones. They got the manhood, they got the courage. They don't come by twos. We gotta slink around, hangtail hounds. They burn us when we dogs, they burn us when we men, and they come by tens. I had a buddy, 6 foot of man, muscled up perfect, game to the heart. They don't come by ones. Outworked and outfought any man or 2 men. They don't come by twos. He spoke out of turn at the commissary. They gave him a day to get out of the county. He didn't take it. He said, come and get me. They came and got him, and they came by tens. He stayed in the county. He lays there dead. They don't come by ones. They don't come by twos, but they come by tens.
I am accused of tending to the past by Lucille Clifton. I am accused of tending to the past as if I made it, as if I sculpted it with my own hands. I did not. This past was waiting for me when I came. A monstrous, unnamed baby. And I, with my mother's itch, took it to breast and named it History. She is more human now, learning languages every day, remembering faces, names, and dates. When she is strong enough to travel on her own, beware, she will.
I am a black woman. The music of my song, some sweet arpeggio of tears, is written in a minor key. And I can be heard humming in the night. Can be heard humming in the night. I lost Nat's swinging body in a rain of tears and heard my son scream all the way from Anzio. For peace he never knew. I learned Da Nang and Pork Chop Hill in anguish. Now my nostrils know the gas, and these trigger-tired fingers seek the softness in my warrior's beard. I am a black woman, tall as a cypress, strong beyond all definition, still defying time and place and circumstance, assailed, impervious, indestructible. Look on me and be renewed. Thank you.
Okay, we all know this. Maury Evans, who can be born black? Who can be born black and not sing the wonder of it, the joy, the challenge, and to come together in a coming togetherness, vibrating with the fires of pure knowing, reeling with power, ringing with the sound above sound above sound, to explode in the majesty of our oneness, our coming together in a coming togetherness. Who can be born black and not exalt?
This is Nikki-Rosa by Nikki Giovanni. It's an autobiographical poem. Childhood remembrances are always a drag if you're black. You always remember things like living in Woodlawn with no inside toilet. And if you become famous or something, they never talk about how happy you were to have your mother all to yourself, and how good the water felt when you got your bath in one of those big tubs that folk in Chicago barbecue in. And somehow, when you talk about home, it never gets across how much you understood their feelings as the whole family attended meetings about Hollydale. And even though you remember, your biographers never understand your father's pain as he sells his stock and another dream goes. And though you're poor, it isn't poverty that concerns you. And though they fought a lot, it isn't your father's drinking that makes any difference, but only that everybody is together and you and your sister have happy birthdays and very good Christmases. And I really hope no white person ever has cause to write about me, because they never understand. Black love is black wealth. And they'll probably talk about my hard childhood and never understand that all the while I was quite happy.
Knoxville, Tennessee. I always like summer best. You can eat fresh corn from Daddy's garden, and okra and greens and cabbage, and lots of barbecue and buttermilk and homemade ice cream at the church picnic, and listen to gospel music outside at the church homecoming, and go to the mountains with your grandmother, and go barefooted and be warm all the time, not only when you go to bed and sleep.
This is The Dry Spell by Kevin Young. Waking early with the warming house, my grandmother knew what to do. Taking care not to wake Dada, she cooked up a storm in darkness, adding silent spices and hot sauce to stay cool. She ate later, alone after the children had been gathered and made to eat her red eggs. Dada rose late, long after the roosters had crowed his name, clearing his ashy throat, pulling on long woolly underwear to make him sweat even more. The fields have gone long enough without water, he'd like to say. So can I. And when he returned, pounds heavier from those thirsty fields, he was even cooler, losing each soaked woolen skin to the floor, dropping naked rain in his wife's earthen arms.
Those winter Sundays. by Robert Hayden. Sundays, too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold, then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold, splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices?
Here is a poem that comes directly out of my boyhood in Detroit, and it's called Those Winter Sundays. Sundays, too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made bank fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the coal splintering breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the coal, and polish my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices?
The Negro Speaks of Rivers by Langston Hughes. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in the human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn at golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers.
The Creation by James Weldon Johnson. And God stepped out on space, and he looked around and said, I'm lonely. I'll make me a world. And as far as the eye of God could see, darkness covered everything, blacker than 100 midnights down in a cypress swamp. Then God smiled, and the darkness rolled up on one side, and the light stood shining on the other. And God said, that's good. Then God reached out and took the light in his hands, and God rolled the light around in his hands until he made the sun. And he set that sun ablazing in the heavens. And the light that was left from making the sun, God gathered it up in a shining ball and flung it against the darkness, spangling the night with the moon and stars. Then down between the darkness and the light, he hurled the world. And God said, that's good. Then God himself stepped down, and the sun was on his right hand, and the moon was on his left, and the stars were clustered about his head, and the earth was under his feet. And God walked, and where he trod, his footsteps hollowed the valleys out and bulged the mountains up. Then he stopped and looked and saw that the earth was hot and barren. So God stepped over to the edge of the world, and he spat out the 7 seas. He battled his eyes, and the lightning flashed. He clapped his hands, and the thunders rolled, and the waters above the earth came down. Then the green grass sprouted, and the little red flowers blossomed, and the pine tree pointed his finger to the sky, and the oak spread out his arm. And God smiled again, and the rainbow appeared and curled itself around his shoulder. Then God raised his arm, and he waved his hand, and over the land and over the sea. And he said, bring forth, bring forth. And quicker than God could drop his hand, fishes and fowls and birds and beasts swam the rivers and the seas, roamed the forests and the woods, and split the air with wings. And God said, that's good. Then God walked around, and God looked around on all that he had made. He looked at his sun, he looked at his moon, and he looked at his little stars. He looked on his world and all its living things, and God said, I'm lonely still. Then God sat down on the side of a hill where he could think. By a deep, wide river he sat down. With his head in his hands, God thought and thought, till he thought, I'll make me a man. Up from the bed of a river, God scooped the clay. And by the bank of the river, he kneeled him down. And there the great God Almighty, who lit the sun and fixed it in the sky, who rounded the earth in the middle of his hand, this great God, like a mammy bending over her baby, kneeled down in the dust, toiling over a lump of clay, till he shaped it in his own image. Then into it he blew the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Amen. Amen.
This is The Mother by Gwendolyn Brooks. Abortions will not let you forget. You remember the children you got that you did not get. The damp small pulps with little or no hair. The singers and workers that never handle the air. You will never neglect or beat them, or silence or buy with a sweet. You will never wind up the sucking thumb, or scuttle off ghosts that come. You will never leave them, controlling your luscious sigh, and return for a snack of them with gobbling mother eye. I have heard in the voices of the wind, the voices of my dim, killed children. I have said, sweets, if I sinned, if I seized your luck and your lives from your unfinished reach, if I stole your births and your names, your straight baby tears and your games, your stilted or lovely loves, your tumults, your marriages, your aches, your deaths. If I poisoned the beginnings of your breaths, believe that even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate. Though why should I whine that the crime was other than mine, since anyhow, or you are dead, or rather, or instead, you were never made. But that too, I am afraid, is faulty. Oh, what should I say? How is the truth to be said? You were born, you had body, you died. It's just that you never giggled or planned or cried. Believe me, I loved you all. Believe me, I knew you, though faintly, but I loved you all.
This is the poem that started this project, actually, because Ruby and I were in New York celebrating Gwendolyn Brooks, and Ruby forgot her glasses, and so she was getting ready to read the Brownsville Mother Lauders in Mississippi. Meanwhile, Mississippi Mother burns bacon, and she didn't have her glasses, so she said, Nikki, read this for me. And we were reading it. We were reading it together.
Yes.
This, of course, is about Emmett Till.
A Bronzeville mother loiters in Mississippi. Meanwhile, Mississippi mother burns bacon.
Yeah. From the first, it had been like a ballad.
It had the beat inevitable. It had the blood, a wildness cut up and tied in little bunches, like the four-line stanzas of the ballads she had never quite understood. The ballads they had set her to in school.
Herself, the milk-white maid, the maid mild of the ballad, pursued by the dark villain, rescued by the fine prince, the happiness ever after that was worth anything. It was good to be the maid mild that made the breath go fast.
Her bacon burned. She hastened to hide it in the step-on can and drew more strips from the meat case. The eggs and sour milk did well. She set out a jar of her new quince preserves. But there was something about the matter of the dark villain. Yeah. He should have been older, perhaps.
The hacking down of a villain was made more fun to think about when his menace possessed an undisputed breadth, undisputed height,
and a harsh kind of vice. And best of all, when his history was cluttered with the bones of many eaten knights and princesses.
The fun was disturbed, then all but nullified, when the dark villain was a
blackish child of 14, with eyes still too young to be dirty, and a mouth too young to have lost every reminder of its infant softness.
The boy must have been surprised, for these were grown-ups.
Yeah, grown-ups were supposed to be wise.
And the fine prince.
And that other, yes.
So tall.
So broad.
So grown.
Perhaps the boy had never guessed that the trouble with grown-ups was that under the magnificent shell of adulthood, just under, waited the baby, full of tantrums.
It occurred to her that there may have been something ridiculous in the picture of the fine prince rushing with that breadth and height, mature solidness, whose lack
in the dark villain was impressing her, confronting her more and more as this first day after the trial and acquittal wore on, rushing with his heavy companion to hack down, unhorsed, that little foe. Yes, so much had happened, she could not remember now what that foe had done against her, or if anything had been done.
The one thing in the world she did know and knew with terrifying clarity was that her composition had disintegrated.
That although the pattern prevailed, the breaks were everywhere. That she could think of no thread capable of the necessary sew work.
She made the babies sit in their places at the table.
And then, before calling him, she hurried to the mirror with her comb and lipstick. It was necessary to be more beautiful than ever. The beautiful wife. Well, sometimes she fancied he looked at her as though measuring her.
As if he considered.
Had she been worth it? Had she been worth the blood, the cramped cries, the little stuttering bravado, the gradual dulling of those Negro eyes?
The sudden, overwhelming little boyness in that barn.
Whatever she might feel or half feel, the lipstick necessity was something apart. He must never conclude that she had not been worth it.
He sat down, that fine prince, and began buttering a biscuit. He looked at his hands. He twisted in his chair. He scratched his nose.
He glanced again, almost secretly, at his hands. More papers were in from the north, he mumbled. More papers were in from the north, more papers from the north, more papers, more meddling headlines with their pepper words.
Bestiality.
And barbarism. And
shocking.
The half sneers he had mastered for the trial wore across his sweet and pretty face.
What he'd like to do, he explained, was kill them all.
Kill them all.
Kill them all. The time lost.
The unwanted fame.
Still, it had been fun to show those intruders a thing or two.
To show that snappy-eyed mother, that sassy northern brown-black.
Nothing could stop Mississippi.
He knew that. Big fella knew that.
And
What was so good? Mississippi knew it.
Nothing and nothing could stop Mississippi.
They could send in their petitions and scar their newspapers with bleeding headlines.
The governors could appeal to Washington. What I want, the older baby said,
is lasses
on my jam.
Whereupon the younger baby picked up the molasses pitcher and threw the molasses in his brother's face.
Instantly, the fine prince leaned across the table and slapped the small and smiling criminal.
She did not speak. When the hand came down on the way, she could look at her child.
At her baby child. She could
only think of the blood.
Only of the blood. Surely, her baby's cheek had disappeared.
And in its place,
surely,
hung a heaviness.
A lengthening red.
A red that had no end.
She shook her head.
It was not true, of course.
It was not true at all.
The child's face was, as always, the color of paste in her paste jar.
She left the table to the tune of the children's lamentations, which were shriller than ever.
She looked out of the window.
Mm-hmm. She said not a word. That was one of the new somethings.
The fear.
The fear.
The fear tying her as with iron.
And suddenly, she felt his hands upon her.
He had followed her to the window.
The children were whimpering now, such bits of tots, and she, their mother, could not protect them.
She looked at her shoulders.
Still gripped to the claim of his hands. She tried, but could not resist the idea that a red ooze was seeping, spreading darkly, thickly, slowly over her white shoulders.
Her own shoulders.
And over all of Earth and Mars.
He whispered something to her, did the fine prince, something about love and night and intention.
She heard no hoofbeat of the horse and saw no flash of the shining steel, and he pulled her face around to meet his, and there it was, close, close.
For the first time in all the days and nights, his mouth wet and red.
So very, very red.
Closed over hers.
Then a sickness heaved within her.
The courtroom Coca-Cola, the courtroom beer, and hate and sweat and drone pushed like a wall against her.
She wanted to bear it, but his mouth would not go away.
And
neither would the decapitated
explanation points
of that
other woman's eyes.
She did not scream. She stood there. But a hatred for him burst into glorious flower.
And its perfume
clasped them. Bigger than all magnolias.
The last bleak news of the ballad. The rest of the rugged music. The last quatrain of Emmett Till.
This is A Sunset of the City by Gwendolyn Brooks. Already I am no longer looked at with lechery or love. My daughters and sons have put me away with marbles and dolls, are gone from the house. My husband and lovers are pleasant or somewhat polite. And night is night. It is a real chill out. The genuine thing. I am not deceived. I do not think it is still summer, because sun stays and birds continue to sing. It is summer gone that I see. It's summer gone. The sweet flowers indrying and dying down. The grasses forgetting their blaze and consenting to brown. It is a real chill out. The fall crisp comes. I am aware there is winter to heed. There is no warm house that is fitted with my need. I am cold in this cold house, whose washed echoes are tremulous down lost halls. I am a woman and dusty, standing among new affairs. I am a woman who hurries through her prayers.
Yet Do I Marvel by Countee Cullen. I doubt not God is good, well-meaning, kind. And did he stoop to quibble, could tell why the little buried mole continues blind, why flesh that mirrors him must someday die, make plain the reason tortured Tantalus is baited by the fickle fruit, declare if merely brute caprice dooms Sisyphus to struggle up a never-ending stair. Inscrutable his ways are, and immune to catechism by his mind too strewn with petty cares to slightly understand what awful brain compels his awful hand. Yet do I marvel at this curious thing, to make a poet black and bid him sing.
Incident by Countee Cullen. Once riding in old Baltimore, heart filled, head filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger. And so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember.
Paul Laurence Dunbar's We Wear the Mask. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be otherwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh, great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the city is vile beneath our feet, and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask.
Gasp, smile shyly, but they disappear before I spoke. What would I have said to them? Come with me? Take me home? Are you my mother? No, I sat alone in countless Chinese restaurants eating almond cookies, sipping tea with spoons and spoons of sugar. Popcorn and coffee was dinner. When I fainted from migraine in the grocery store, a Portuguese man above me mouthed, "No breakfast." He gave me orange juice and chocolate bars. The color red sprang into relief, singing Wagner's Valkyrie. Entire tribes gyrated and drummed in my head. I learned the samba from a Brazilian man so tiny, so festooned with glitter, I was certain that he slept inside a filigreed Fabergé egg. No one at the door, no salesmen, Mormons, meter readers, exterminators, no Harriet Tubman, no one. Red notes sounding in a gray trolley town.
You and I are women, not angels, and practical in darkness. I throw out my hands, wait for the dark to open. In darkness, I kiss my phantomless face, taste your thirsty tears in my dream. Your shiny footprints shame me. So tell me, what a glimpse of future turn you back. I am your silence. You cross your road. Is asleep? Mother, oh mother, oh mother, I am turning. My road is feathers.
Ah, but the death I've given away is more mine than the one I've kept. From my hands the poisoned apple, from my bow the mistletoe dart. Then I think of Mama, her bountiful breasts. When I was a child, I really swear Mama's kisses could heal. I remember her promise and whisper it over my sweet son's sleep. When you float to the bottom, child, like a mote down a sunbeam, you'll see me from 1,000,000,000 miles away, my eyes looking up to you, my arms outstretched for you like night.
I want to kill her, and even though you are a mother and understand why she did not run because you wouldn't have left your baby, you know you cannot live with Mother Mouse. Though, of course, now that you have paid to put the soil under the porch, you understand you have put a sign out, mice welcome. And this poem recognizes that. So when you find yourself on the first day of fall, which is not actually the first day, but simply early October, and because it has been such a dry, hot summer, the leaves aren't really turning, so it looks enough like late spring to make you think back to when you and your sister used to catch the train from Cincinnati to Knoxville to go spend the summer with your grandparents. And you thought you were pretty well grown because Mommy didn't have to travel with you. And the two of you were given money, which is not exactly true because your sister was given money, and you were told to ask her if you wanted something. And we couldn't wait to get to Jellicoe because the man came on the train with ham sandwiches, which were made with butter instead of mayonnaise, and ice-cold little Cokes in a bottle. And we had enough for that, although we always shared the potato chips. And we didn't have a care that the world was not a warm and welcoming place. But we didn't realize that all up and down the line there was a congregation of black men looking out for us, that no one said or did anything to disturb our sense of well-being. And what a loss that more black men are in prison than on trains which don't exist, protecting 2 little girls from the horrors of this world, allowing them to grow up thinking people are kind. So even though we lived in a segregated world, and even though everybody knows that was wrong, that band of brothers put their arms around us and got us from our mother to our grandmother seamlessly. And this poem recognizes that. And I do have a lawn jockey next to the river birch, just a bit to the back of the bird baths, beside the bleached cow's head, the ceramic elephant, the rabbit, and the talking dogs, and you can easily see that I collect foolish things, but they make me happy. And I was ecstatic to see Emerge pick Clarence Thomas, the poster boy for lawn jockeys, on the cover. Because I agree with the folk who say give Scalia 2 votes and save a salary, since Thomas must surely be causing Thurgood Marshall many a turnover in his grave, while he talks about the disservice done to him by affirmative action. Though old Clarence didn't sell hurt until the Nazi right was buying. And I really don't understand how some people can take advantage of every affirmative initiative, from college to law school to EEOC to the Supreme Court, and say these programs do not work. And even old foolish Shelby Still was saying his children didn't need a scholarship, as if the existence of the scholarship should be eliminated since he didn't. And what kind of sense is it that when you take a pitiful little dumb bunny like Armstrong Williams, who says things like, "My parents taught me to work hard and behave myself," as if other parents give lessons. "Now, Kwame, I want you to practice laziness today. You were far too busy yesterday." Or worse, "Now, Keisha, I expect loose morals from you. All last week you were studying and cleaning the house and helping out at the church and visiting the sick in the hospital, and we just can't have none of that." And that is why those little lawn jockeys for the far right are so despicable, because they lack not only good sense but common compassion. And like the old jokes about black people being just a bunch of crabs, the black right is pulling people down, because they think if they don't knock black people down, they will not be able to stay where they are. And they are, of course, right, because the only usefulness they have is to stand in opposition to progress. And this poem recognizes that. So your back hurts anyway, but you have to close things down, as winter will be here. And no matter what else is wrong with winter, the little lawn jockeys get covered, the mice find a home, and little girls travel back and forth with the love of black men protecting them from the cold. And even when the black men can't protect them, they wish they could, which has to be respected since it's the best they can do. And somehow you want to pop popcorn and make pig feet and fried chicken and blueberry muffins and some sort of baked apple. And you will sit near your fire and tell tales of growing up in segregated America. And the tales will be so loving, even the white people will feel shortchanged by being privileged. And we call it the blues with rhythm, and they want it to be rock and roll. And all the thump, thump, thump coming from cars is not black boys listening to rap, but all boys wishing they could be that beautiful boy who was a seed planted in stone, who grew to witness to the truth, and who always kept it real. And lots of times there is nothing we can do through our pain and through our tears, but continue to love. And this poem recognizes that.
Drapery Factory, Gulfport, Mississippi, 1956, by Natasha Trethewey. She made the trip daily, though later she would not remember how far to tell the grandchildren. Better that way. She could keep those miles a secret, and her black face, and her black hands, and the pink bottoms of her black feet, a minor inconvenience. She does remember the men she worked for, and that often she sat side by side with white women, all of them, bent over, pushing into the hum of the machines, their right calves tensed against the pedals. Her lips tightened, speaking of quitting time when the colored women filed out slowly to have their purses checked, the insides laid open and exposed by the boss's hand. But then she laughs when she recalls the soiled Kotex she saved, stuffed into a bag in her purse, and Adam's look on one white man's face, hand deep in knowledge.
Kwame Alexander wrote a poem for Nikki. It says, Nikki, if you were a song, I'd call you jazz. Clap for you, snap for you, sing for you, swing with you. I'd color you Ellington, elegant, and essential in my life. These are two short poems by Tupac Shakur. The first is called, there are many titles, but it's called The River. And the second is The Rose That Grew from a Crack from the Concrete. The first. As long as some suffer, the river flows forever. As long as there is pain, the river flows forever. As strong as a smile can be, the river flows forever. And as long as you are with me, we'll ride the river together. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny, it seems, but it's keeping its dreams. It's learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. Mercy Killing by Ramika L. Bingham. At Big Ma's, I stood in the middle of each room, careful not to lean on walls or too near closets, afraid the vermin, now outnumbering the hairs of her head, would find their way to my purse or pockets. When asked to go to a drawer for antacid, I hesitated, knowing I'd have to reach in amidst that dark scattering to soothe her. These are the sacrifices we make, my mother said, while on the floor at Big Ma's feet, clipping her toenails, using a slipper to smash roaches as they came. My father hated the dirtiness of any place, yet knelt in his finest charcoal suit near the phone cord, twisting its disconnected wires, surely aware of the thick dust graying his elbows and knees, until he heard a dial tone and Big Ma say, "I can call now if I need you." He did not rise. Hours later, in public with our private lives well clothed, when I saw the silvery brown pest slip from his pants cuff, remembering my parents' selflessness, their hushed mercy, I used my sharp-tipped shoes to make a sacrifice and killed it. Quiet, swift, without mentioning my fear and without his ever knowing.
I was born in the Congo. I walked to the Fertile Crescent and built the Sphinx. I designed a pyramid so tough that a star that only glows every 100 years falls into the center, giving divine, perfect light. I am bad. I sat on the throne drinking nectar with Allah. I got hot and sent an ice age to Europe to cool my thirst. My oldest daughter is Nefertiti. The tears from my birth pains created the Nile. I am a beautiful woman. I gazed on the forest and burned out the Sahara Desert. With a packet of goat's meat and a change of clothes, I crossed it in 2 hours. I am a gazelle, so swift, you can't catch me. For a birthday present when he was 3, I gave my son Hannibal an elephant. He gave me Rome for Mother's Day. My strength flows ever on. My son Noah built Newark, and I stood proudly at the helm as we sailed on a soft summer day. I turned myself into myself and was Jesus. Men intone my loving name. All praises, all praises. I am the one who would save. I sow diamonds in my backyard. My bowels deliver uranium. The filings from my fingernails are semi-precious jewels. On a trip north, I caught a cold and blew my nose, giving oil to the Arab world. I am so hip, even my errors are correct. I sailed west to reach east and had to round off the earth as I went. The hair from my head thinned, and gold was laid across 3 continents. I am so perfect, so divine, so ethereal, so surreal, I cannot be comprehended except by my permission. I mean, I can fly like a bird in the sky.